What's up, guys? It's Kristen, and I've got another video. Today, we're going to be talking about strings, arrays, characters, and operations that we can perform on strings. So let's get right into it. Here is an example of how to declare and initialize a string. Say we have the string data type, we give this variable a name called sentence, and we put in quotation marks anything we want to put into the string. So here I've put a sentence: the brave dog ran with all his might bravely through the wood, inside of the string. Notice that strings can incorporate lots of different characters. Strings are basically arrays of characters, and characters can be anything that you see on your keyboard. So anything from dollar signs and exclamation points and periods and spaces and commas to uppercase and lowercase letters or numbers. Um, C++ knows that when you actually write a character that is a number, that it is a number, even though you're storing it as a character data type. So a couple of things here is that, if you're using characters and you're declaring characters, you use single quotation marks instead of double quotation marks. Characters can be set up in an array just like strings can. And in order to do any operations on strings, you're going to have to use the hashtag include string at the top of your program. Okay, so let's walk through an example here. Say we have the string, the brave dog ran bravely through the woods. So to give you an idea of what happens when you go through a string, say you wanted to search for a word in this string, what's going to happen is that you're going to actually go through this array of characters, character by character, using a loop. Because we're dealing with arrays, we have to use loops to check the values of every space in the array for what we're searching for. Now, what you can see here is a visual representation of that. What we want to do is basically take this word, say we wanted to break up this sentence and store the words in the sentence into an array. Well, what we would have to do is we would have to look through the entire string character by character and figure out what we want and what we don't want. So I'm going to introduce you to a term here called the delimiter. Sometimes it's called a separator, but what this basically means is that it is a gap character between our desired data. A lot of times when you see a comma separated file or CSV, you will have commas separating strings or numbers or any type of data, and we can actually use that very effectively to parse data because it is part of how we will actually read through the file, as you'll see here in a second. So what you can see here is that say you're looping through a string from its beginning at a 0 position, which would be the T here, to its length, which would be the period at the end of the entire string. What you're going to do is you're going to check character by character for what you want. So in this example here, what we do want is we want the word the, but we don't want the space in between the and brave. This space would be considered a delimiter, and it's not something that we want in our program. So a couple of operations that you can perform using strings include the s.length. Notice here that I've got the name of the string, and then I'm using the .length on the name of that string variable. And here the same thing, if you wanted to use substring, you would have to call it on a string variable, and you will have to give it the position that you want it to start at and the length of whatever you want the substring to be. So for instance, say you wanted to check the entire array, you could start at position I and go to the length of the substring that you're searching for, which would probably be another variable that you would have to declare. Substrings are basically smaller strings to be searched for in a larger string. You have to use include string in order to do this, and it will go from position to length. Those are really big things to remember about substrings. So an example here in the same sentence would be dog. If we were looking for the word dog, that would be a substring of the sentence that we have, string sentence. So let's look at an example here. So say we have a word problem that says, given a sentence and a word to search for in the sentence, write a function to check for the word in the sentence. If the word occurs more than once, keep track of the occurrences and display to the user both the word and the number of occurrences in the sentence. If the word is not in the sentence, let the user know. Okay, so I've written up some code which I'm going to just jump into here. Let's go ahead and take a look at our main first before we do anything else. So what I've done here is in my main, I have declared a sentence and I have declared a search strings. These are really important because we're going to have to use these to find what we're looking for. The next thing here is that you'll notice that I am asking the user to enter a sentence, and then I am storing the sentence into the string variable using getLine instead of cn. Cn is very useful for individual numbers or words or characters. However, when it comes to a complex thing like a string, especially if you have a large number of delimiters, getLine becomes extremely useful in storing larger strings of text. So we're using getLine to store the sentence and the search word. And we are now going to pass those into our function. So let's take a look at our function here. I've created a function called wordCheck. Now, a couple of things to look at here is that I have set this up to work for multiple scenarios. The first thing I want you to see is what I have declared up here. I have a temp, which is going to be extremely important. Temp is really useful in parsing strings because it will allow you to temporarily store words that you want to pass into an array. So here I've also declared a string array and set it equal to size. Size is going to be an arbitrarily large number because I don't know how much I actually want to do with a sentence until I actually input it. I've got a couple of variables here, which I'll go into in a second here. But basically, let's take a look at the character separators here that I have declared. You can say separator, you can say delimiter. I've heard it both ways. What we're looking at here is a character for a space and a character for a comma. So regardless of the type of thing you would see in the English language, these are the two most common types of characters that you would see in an English sentence. So let's walk through the next part here. So in order to parse a string, we're going to have to loop through it because it is an array. Now the first thing I want you to think about is, say we have this type of a sentence, like the brave dog ran bravely through the woods. Now notice that these are all separated by delimiters except for at the end of the last word. So what I have done here is I have taken my sentence, and the first thing I have done is I have actually added in an additional separator character so that when I loop through the entire array and I get to the very last character, I know that I store the last word that is seen because there is a separator character following that word. Okay, so let's see how I'm actually doing this here. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to loop through the array properly. Okay, so I'm using a for loop here because I know that I can find the exact length of a string using the .length operator from the string library. This is really important because it makes your job a lot easier. You can use while loops to do this, however. Since you know the exact size of the string already using the .length operator, for loops tend to be more efficient for dealing with strings and parsing. Okay, so what I've done here is I'm checking to see if every character that I go along this array, well, if it's not the separators that I'm looking for, if it's not a space, if it's not a comma, we're going to store that into our temporary variable. So if I had the word hello and then a comma, I would store every letter up to the comma and then stop once I had seen the separator. Otherwise, if I do see the separator, I'm going to take temp and put it into an array that I have created for words. So if you see the separator, you've stopped, finished reading a word, and you're going to take that word and store it into your word array. I'm also going to reset my temp variable to be an empty string for the next word that I will go to once I start iterating past the next eliminator. And I'm also going to increment j to keep track of my array. Now the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to loop through the array that I have set up for my words. So here you can see that I am going until the size of the array, which I've already specified. This is really great because this is basically going to go through the entire array that you've set up as long as you haven't hit the size of it. And what I'm doing here is I'm checking to see if at every box of words that I have stored, so if I've stored one word, I'm going to check to see if it equals the substring that I'm looking for, or the search word. And if it is, I'm going to increment a count. So if I see it, I'm going to say, oh, there it is. Otherwise, I'm going to increment a count for whether it's not there. So say I've gotten to the end of the string array of all these words that I've just parsed, and I've gone through the whole thing and I keep counting k. Well, if I keep counting k every single time, basically if k reaches the size of the array, I haven't found the word that I'm looking for. However, if my count is ever greater than 0, that means that I've actually found the word that I'm looking for in the sentence. And here I can basically just output to the user the word that they're looking for and the number of times that it has come up, because I'm keeping track of it with a count. So this is one way you can do this. So if I was to run this now, I'm going to take this out. We'll see this in a second. If I was to take this out and run it now, we're going to enter the sentence, the brave dog ran bravely. Let's look for dog. Okay, so what we see here is that dog is in the sentence because it came here, and we know that the count is greater than 0. And we know that the number of occurrences is 1. Now, the other thing you want to be thinking about is getting a substring. Some people have asked me about using substrings correctly. So let's take a look at a separate function for dealing with substrings. Okay, so here I have created a numCheck function, which is basically going to check to see for a count in the word. So this is a way of using a substring to check for a count. So here I'm passing in a sentence and I'm passing in a search word. I have declared a substring and set it equal to nothing, and I have another variable for count here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop from the 0 position to the length of the sentence, and I'm going to check to see if the sub, which I'm setting as sentence.substring, so this is, you're using the substring function on your string sentence. You're going to go from position I, and you're going to be looking for the length of the search word. Here, if the sub, which I've declared here and initialized, I've declared it here and initialized it here inside of the loop. If sub equals the search word, I'm going to increment my count and then return that count. So let's see this in action. Okay. So let's say we have a word that comes up multiple times. Let's search for it. So what happens here is that we know that the word is going to come up 3 times. We've actually counted the number of times that it actually happens, and we've returned the count. In our cout statement, we have put the word appears. We're using the function call and telling you how many times it comes out in the sentence. So just to recap here, substrings are smaller versions of a larger string. Delimiters are gaps between desired data, and arrays are accessed with loops. Okay guys, I hope this was informative and I hope it helps you with your homework 5. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys next time.